Wrestling, like any other form of media, has major stars that define an era or a generation. Bruno Sammartino, Hulk Hogan, the usual names you hear are for a reason. It's because they excelled and brought in business like nobody else. Every era has its names that are brought up, and for the WWE, it's expected that every couple of years, somebody comes in and takes over from the previous guy. This was no problem for many years. Stone Cold and John Cena followed up, but then the cycle hit a flatline of sorts. Usually, the guys WWE push are huge draws and bring ratings increases. John Cena was depended on and pushed like almost nobody else in the past. Cena's push was a bit different to others, and to make matters worse, WWE didn't have many new stars after the OVW4. Every one of the guys they hyped up ended up failing, or they didn't care about pushing hard. It's clear that the outcome of this would lead to constant John Cena, Triple H, and Randy Orton matches. At the same time, they were trying out the next branch of stars. The first ones failed, or they didn't push them hard, but they were going to try out the next ones. John Morrison, The Miz, Kofi Kingston, and Dolph Ziggler. What we didn't know is that these guys would suffer the same fate, just more successful than the previous guys, especially The Miz, who actually main evented WrestleMania. His main eventing wasn't even unusual at the time because they spent the entire year of 2010 pushing him. But there came a point where WWE didn't believe Miz could be a permanent main eventer. He was hyped as someone similar to The Rock at times, but whenever he was up there with the very best, it didn't feel like he belonged. The roster is becoming more of a problem, and it shows when you have Mark Henry and Christian getting pushed hard. Since when did WWE care about them that much? They deserved it though, and not in some Make-A-Wish title reign type stuff. But they played the roles well. I just know that if WWE had one of those younger stars, they wouldn't be in that position. With WrestleMania 27 coming up, the show set up a very consistent and eventually controversial precedent. Triple H and The Undertaker were mostly away throughout 2010, especially Triple H, but with the Big Show coming up, not the Big Show Paul White, with the Big Show WrestleMania, it was time for a return. The feud had a good build and followed up on the whole Shawn Michaels story from WrestleMania 26. They put on a show here and the best match in a very dull and underwhelming WrestleMania. Triple H showed up the next night, but it was just to address the event. He went into hiding again. This was very strange. Even as a kid, I was convinced Triple H would return. He was going to return as the leader of Nexus. Nope, and I actually believed that. He's gonna return after WrestleMania 27. Nope, neither happened, and he slowly became a part-time talent. This feud was good, it was its own thing, and it wasn't presented as the biggest thing on the show. Could WWE have made it much bigger? If they really wanted to, they could have made a main event. It's just The Rock was involved with the Cena and Miz match, so that makes sense. Fast forward a year later, WrestleMania 28 was promoted as the biggest WrestleMania of all time. The Rock finally returned in singles action for the first time in 9 years, and he was going up against John Cena in a generational clash. Triple H and Undertaker teased the end, and it was a mega success in one of the better WrestleManias of its era. And the two main reasons why this event was a success was because of the stars of the past. The buy rate was over 1 million, which was done with pirated streams around and much more prevalent than in previous years. But at the same time, WWE saw something here. It was something that was going to bring out a lot of short-term success. Part-time talent. The stars that were pushed around 2012 were Sheamus, Daniel Bryan, and CM Punk. The biggest was CM Punk, but even he could have been bigger than he was if it wasn't for some strange booking. And when you bring these three in front of the older guys, it feels like they're missing something. And that something is credibility. They don't feel as big as the older guys. On the other side though, when you look at the positives from the scenario, they finally pushed people that would stay at the top, which was something that was missing for years because they constantly tried with Kofi Kingston, The Miz, and all these guys, but these guys were here to stay. That whole generation didn't succeed, and the only guys that benefited the most were the guys that were actually around beforehand, like John Cena, Jeff Hardy, and a couple of others. These guys were some of the first that actually succeeded, but the biggest impact to happen in 2012 was the return of Brock Lesnar. The Beast's return marked the start of that part-time era that you all know about, and immediately Brock was in the main event. It's reasonable and not dumb. He's Brock Lesnar, the former UFC champion, the UFC heavyweight champion. If you sign him, he can't even smell the mid-card scene. That's not the problem. He was positioned in the biggest rivalry of the summer of 2012 against Triple H, another part-time talent, and it dominated TV time around SummerSlam time. There wasn't much complaints about the part-timer thing until The Rock won the title. He beat CM Punk, who had a 434-day title reign, and a lot of people didn't like it because Punk was pushed aside for a sequel that didn't need to happen. And again, they knew what they were doing here. It's all about the money. If you do a sequel to The Rock and Cena, it doesn't really need much of a title because it's all about redemption. For John Cena, of course. I personally didn't want to see it, and there was much better matches that they could have done. The Rock versus Brock Lesnar and John Cena versus CM Punk for the WWE Championship in the main event are two much better matches. I don't even get why Triple H needed a rematch. They should have done that retirement tease. We need to start talking about that moment more often. We really do, because I don't see anyone make a mention about it. This guy was in tears crying because he lost to Brock Lesnar. Other than that, WrestleMania 29 was a mega success even though the show itself was bad. The formula was working out very well and would continue to develop over the next couple of years. The WWE didn't seem to realize how much of a problem this would become, as they ended up bringing back Batista. Now, Batista returning was a huge thing, and I personally at the time was very, very happy to see the animal back because Batista was one of my favorites growing up. But the one thing they messed up on was being tone deaf and realizing that this wasn't what the fans wanted. Obviously, Batista's an icon in his own right, and I'd call him a legend. But if Batista was going to be used in 2014, he should have been used the way he did end up being used. But their intention initially was to have him face Randy Orton for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 30. The problem with this event is that it doesn't really establish much because Batista's already a perennial main eventer and one of the very top guys of his era. Not to mention, he faced Randy Orton countless times in the past. Would some people have wanted to see it? Of course, they're going to be in the comment section, they're going to mention it now. But the vast majority, judging by that crowd, wanted Daniel Bryan. This caused a huge ruckus and one of the worst reactions from the fans I've ever seen. It's not just Daniel Bryan getting pushed aside, but the way they were doing it in spite. It felt like it was in spite because they didn't even have him enter the Royal Rumble. They did rectify this later on, and Batista, well, I don't think he should have won the Royal Rumble or did all of that. That crowd, and in general, most of the fans wanted something else. And it's not just, oh, we cry about this. It's the fact that WWE kind of throws stories aside for other things. But he came in, he did his job, and plenty of respect to Batista because at the end of the day, he played a great heel in the main event. One thing I don't have a problem with is Brock being treated like a big deal. He's supposed to be the final boss, and on paper, their intention was perfect for him to topple the great talent, only to fall to a new star. That was the whole intention. Yeah, there was some problems during the way, the fact that he lost to John Cena and Triple H, and some of the ways he lost. The problem though was the fact that WWE was treating all the part-timers like they were above the roster. If your name wasn't John Cena, you were inferior to the part-time talent. Brock Lesnar ended up ending The Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania to set him up very well, followed by a huge title victory that saw him destroy John Cena and put an end to the Super Cena era. Brock was being built up in a logical way. The only problem was that his successor was Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns was the only guy that WWE saw as an equal to the part-timers. They wanted him to follow John Cena as the face of the company. Roman though was very green and forced in a position that he wasn't ready for. So the fans didn't accept it. They're like, why would we accept this after we accepted 10 years of Super Cena winning all the time with not many stars being made in the process? The older guys were still presented as much better than the regular roster. And they were main eventing some of the shows, and again, part-timers main eventing doesn't simply equal bad. Obviously, we all have our own opinions about stuff, but don't think I'm just trying to make this video because, ooh, part-timer bad. I'm literally shilling for him during parts of this video, just want to mention it. Brock and Undertaker's feud, for example, was great. It also showed that WWE put in so much effort to make these guys look cooler even though they're older. These two had a Ruthless Aggression feud in the year of 2015. You don't see this often, and every time someone like Triple H, Brock Lesnar, and eventually Goldberg stood next to one of the full-time talent, they felt much better than them. Now compared to 2012, WWE had many more stars, but similar to what Sheamus, Bryan, and Punk felt, the Shield guys, AJ Styles and Bray Wyatt, missed that edge. Invisible barrier where it's like, hey, these guys feel a bit better than you. WrestleMania 32 is where the part-timer thing kicked up a notch. There was many injuries on the roster at the time. Even Sting, a part-time talent, was out with an injury. The show was full of part-timers, which makes sense, because not only was some of the full-time talent such as John Cena, Randy Orton were missing, but it's WrestleMania. The thing is, to defend this for a moment and try my best to look at it from that perspective, these older guys have the nostalgia factor, not to mention didn't deal with part-timers themselves. Undertaker wasn't worried about Hulk Hogan taking his spot. Like, yeah, Hogan comes in for a nostalgia run, but it wasn't much. Another thing to mention is that these guys brought the most money. As a company, WWE cares about money. And it's not like 3 people paid WWE millions to bring these guys. It's hundreds of thousands of fans paying with their own money to watch the likes of The Undertaker, Brock Lesnar, and Triple H. The counter argument to this though is the fact that WWE didn't present their current stars in the best way. They have the whole 50-50 booking and wrestlers rarely go on a hot streak. Roman Reigns at this time was the biggest star, yet it wasn't rare to see him take a loss. The whole thing was a big problem because when Roman won, people didn't like him. But on the other side, when he gets presented in front of these giants, these mega stars, he doesn't feel as strong as he should be. And this was the man they considered to be number 1. He doesn't look that strong next to Undertaker after losing to Rusev only a couple of weeks earlier. There's a lot of things that factor here, but the main thing I wish WWE focused on was creating a bunch of new talent to be perceived as actual threats. They had a couple of stars at the time, we remember. I think they could have been a little bit more than they were. WrestleMania 32 was very unfortunate and in some ways indicated that the future of WWE was going to be about the past. While Roman Reigns was a major star of the new era, there was nobody else even close to him, and Roman in many ways had problems in his booking. As time went on, WWE continued building their talent. Heading into WrestleMania 33 though saw just how hard the part-timers dominated. When it came down to it, they were in the title picture. Goldberg's return saw him demolish Brock Lesnar to give him his first clean loss in nearly 4 years. This was supposed to be Roman's win, but since he had those reactions, the fans hated him a lot, and WWE would scoff and make fun of you if you considered the possibility of Brock losing to another full-time talent. It ended up going to Goldberg. The story didn't need a championship because it was centered around Brock Lesnar losing his edge and feeling like he had a point to prove. Goldberg was the only man that had his number in the entire WWE. Rocky 3-esque story, but it didn't need a title. It absolutely didn't. The biggest problem with the storyline is the fact that nobody in WWE could touch Brock unless they had the part-timer boost or their name was Roman Reigns. The rest of the roster were clowns in front of Goldberg and Brock. Then they gave them the title. KO and Jericho had their own thing going down for the Universal Championship, and that feud didn't hit the same after Owens lost the title. It's funny looking back because it felt like the title was the exception, but now we had part-timers fighting for it. With Brock, I really understand. I get Brock Lesnar even though he disappeared. I get why he's at the very top. And one of the things that's kind of unfair is the fact that them not showing up often gives them more of an aura compared to the rest. And it's kind of unfair. While WWE's tough schedule was always going to make them look a bit more exposed than the other part-timers. But Brock was a big draw. When his music plays, he gets all the attention. Braun Strowman was the only guy who looked like a fresh challenger that would give Brock a fight. His push was very big and he felt like he belonged in the ring with Brock. Not just because of his size, but because of his presentation. Samoa Joe had a small fire in him at the time that was quickly put out. Now the thing with Samoa Joe is, this one's a bit different. WWE did see some value in Joe by the looks of it, but because he kept on getting injured often, he didn't get a huge push later on. I do wish Joe's WWE run was a bit better, but when you got injuries like that, you're almost cursed. You know, like you guys know about a lot of the wrestlers that get injured often. It's like a red target on you. It's like, oh, why would we push you? But Joe did have a decent program with Brock Lesnar. It wasn't even decent, it was good. It's just, I feel like they blew their load on that so soon when it could have been done later on in Brock's championship run. That was because Brock was being set up for another match with Roman Reigns. Which leads us to the biggest problem. The fact that when WWE tried to put over a talent over the part-timer, his name was always Roman Reigns. They sacrificed a lot of names for Brock Lesnar's title reign in the lead up to WrestleMania 34, all for Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins to me looked very exciting after WrestleMania 33 with the win against The Game, but because of how things were, they didn't capitalize much on the victory. It's a very complicated situation because of multiple things. Nostalgia is like a drug. The Goldberg return is a prime example of that. So many people were happy to see him back and even win the title. I remember many complained, but it didn't matter because the rest of the fans were happy for Goldberg. And we said it many times, but that's what matters to WWE, the money. Nostalgia is very strong. In a couple of years, Roman, Seth, Cody, these guys are going to be seen as much better than whatever talent is at the top then. Now, following 2018, WWE seemed to understand that this whole part-timer thing couldn't be maintained as strong as it was in the past. The ratings were falling at a record rate, even though they featured most of these part-timers. You know, Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, all these guys. The part-timers of the WWE at the time weren't saving the show and making it grandiose. Like back then, like 2012, 13, 14, 15, a part-timer would show up, it'd be big. Pushing Roman Reigns had its issues, but he also came up with leukemia, unfortunately. I spent 4 years with the likes of Brock Goldberg being booked and presented well for Roman Reigns. He was supposed to lead the charge and now he wasn't even around. So Seth Rollins followed up. Before he became enemy number one, he had a great victory over Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. There was a lot of high hopes for him initially, but his reign as a face didn't work so well. The matches were great, but other than that, Rollins as the number one face wasn't good. The win against Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam did a lot, and he was one of my favorite performances of Rollins. I didn't like his selling a lot in that match, but he really showed how gifted he was by turning that crowd back into his favor. It's just, they were in a horrible creative period which didn't allow for Rollins to ride off on that victory. Same thing with his win at WrestleMania 33. He quickly ran into a feud with The Fiend. So around late 2019, The Fiend was one of the most over and popular WWE wrestlers on the entire roster. His character didn't appeal too much to me because there was some logical problems with it, and the fact that they gotta make him look strong or else the character gets ruined. It's very complicated. But heading into WrestleMania, it seemed like it was gonna be The Fiend versus Roman Reigns. The fans are finally going to turn on Roman Reigns after about a year because he was going to get pushed again. But instead of doing that match, WWE opted to do something insane. Now the reason why I say it's insane is because The Fiend wasn't just a regular guy. It's like if he's gonna get defeated and dethroned, he needs to be dethroned by a popular full-timer, right? Like, yeah, Roman Reigns gets booed and all that, but he'd be better than someone else, surely. They decided, you know what? Goldberg got the ratings spikes. We'll have him dethrone The Fiend. Now again, Goldberg was a ratings draw. For some reason, well, not for some reason, we all know why, because he's an established talent, but Goldberg was a big draw, and he felt like a much fresher part-timer compared to the others because he appeared less often compared to them. So they had The Fiend shockingly drop the title to him in Saudi Arabia. The problem with this is, full-timer, blah, blah, blah. You guys know that. But in addition, they halted Bray Wyatt's momentum to hotshot Roman Reigns once again, which didn't happen, of course. It led to Braun Strowman, but that was what their plan was initially. The Fiend didn't reach his final form yet, which should have been at WrestleMania if he was going to lose, surely, right? Because if you're that dominant, surely you lose at WrestleMania. Now, I talked about the Goldberg thing in detail. The one thing they did to make Goldberg look cool is not only use his past reputation, but the fact that he had zero fear of Bray Wyatt. For a moment, I kind of forget that Goldberg's like this part-timer who's not that good of a wrestler, whatever. They made him look very cool in the build to that match. The thing is, I love that story because this was a man who was fearless, and that was his key to victory. The previous guys and the guys to come always had some sort of fear with regards to the Fiend Bray Wyatt. It was amazing stuff, but it also shows you how much effort they put into the part-timers as characters, because those guys, they don't have to work as hard on them to establish them and make them huge stars because they were just that in the past. But we were seeing them do more with the current talent. It wasn't all that good, but the part-timers were actually being used to make the current talent look good. A while later, Brock Lesnar made Drew McIntyre look like the best wrestler on the entire roster. That whole feud is what I wished the part-timers were used for. And again, obviously it wouldn't happen too often because that takes the shine away. But this was the method, and Drew became a main man with one single elimination at the Royal Rumble. Hell, I thought it was enough that he eliminated Brock, but then they had him win the whole thing. Incredible booking for a full-time wrestler, one of the best booking runs WWE had for a wrestler during that era. This is what they should have done. They had Brock, Goldberg, Undertaker, Triple H, John Cena, The Rock, Sting, Kurt Angle, and very few men from the full-time roster benefited. Even if someone beat these guys, they didn't benefit much. AJ Styles, Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, and Drew McIntyre. These four benefited the most. Daniel Bryan was established in WWE before WrestleMania 30. That's why I didn't mention him fully, but he technically counts. You could add him in there. It's just those four went to a very higher level in their careers by feuding with the likes of John Cena and Brock Lesnar. The methods really changed a lot here, and I really like it because it wasn't just part-timer. Like, yeah, some of them did win the belt later on and whatnot, but it was less often, and we'd see them in different roles. At the end of the day, there's a lot of variables when it comes to the part-timer thing. A lot of the wrestlers weren't pushed that hard, not to mention that they're the PG guys and the others were in the Attitude Era, WCW and all that. You feel much grander just by association with that era, so it's always going to be tough. Another important thing to mention is a couple of the matches the part-timers had. They're presented as mythical figures, which works with their legend status, but once something like Crown Jewel 2018 happened, it kind of showed WWE that maybe, just maybe, the whole part-timer thing isn't for the best. While it was making them money, it wasn't sustainable. And it showed here with these two matches. These two matches were some of the worst matches you'd see, and these are definitely two matches that would have been much better in their prime. Two dream matches. So there it is. That's WWE's part-time era. There's lessons to be learned here. At the end of the day, they're all about money, but there came a point in 2018 and 19 where the part-timers weren't really increasing ratings, they were just preventing it from getting worse. I seem to notice that WWE understood this lesson, especially when Roman Reigns unfortunately went away due to leukemia. They had to make Seth Rollins look great. They did it with the victory, but the rest of it wasn't the best. Other than that, nowadays, we do see some part-timers every now and then, but they're presented in a slightly different way. Do I think we'll see part-time champions in the future? Probably. I think we'll see one very soon with John Cena, but only time will tell, so yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of WWE's part-timer era? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the spear on the like button, perhaps the F5 on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.